All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to talk about making or starting an application, an Express application that uses an API. So we're going to use a different API we haven't really seen yet. It contains movie data. If you're familiar with IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, this is a version of the data contained in that API called the Open Movie Database, OMDB. So IMDb doesn't actually provide an API that we could use. So someone went through and basically created this API, OMDB, Open Movie Database, that's free and contains all the movie information off of IMDb. So we're going to make a simple app. Basically has two views, an Express app. One will be a search form, and you can type in something like Frozen or Harry Potter, and then it will do a search on the API using your search term, and then show you a results page with a list of 10 movies, up to 10 movies at least, that match your query. It's going to be very simple, as I mentioned. We're not going to style it or anything. This is really about just showing you how to get going with an API. And it's basically what we've already seen using the request module, just like we did here, but instead of making the request just in a empty JS file, you'll put it inside of an Express app, like in a route, for example. So let's start by making our basic Express app. I'm gonna make a new directory here, and I'll just call this movie search app. CD into that, npm init. Sure, that's our name, version. I'll do app.js. Everything else is fine. Okay, then we'll do our npm install -- save, and we want Express, we want EJS, and we want to use request because we're going to be making a request. Just like that. Let that finish up. And while that's going, let's talk about the way that this API is structured. So if we take a look on the documentation, the URL, by the way, is just omdbapi.com. If we take a look at the documentation and scroll down, you can see that there's a list of parameters that we can use. So there are two main ways we access this API: by ID or title, and by search. So this will make sense once I show you some examples, but the idea is that if you have the specific ID of a movie, so every movie has an ID. So if I have the ID for Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, the film, then I can get all sorts of information about that one movie. Plot, the Rotten Tomatoes data, the year it was made, the poster image, a bunch of stuff. But I can also search. So if I'm not sure of a title, or if I just want to add search capability and I want to get multiple results. So to clarify, this first one we talked about will give you one result only, and a lot of detail and information for one result. But if you want to search and get 10 results, and I could search for Harry Potter or Harry and just Harry and get multiple results, but I won't get a ton of information. So I'll show you how that works. Let's start with search. Notice that the parameter S is required. So that's the only required thing. And the description is that it's a movie title to search for. So it's kind of confusing, but if we just make a request, I'll show you what URL we need to go to. So I'm going to just copy this URL, open up a new tab, and if you scroll up, you can see send all data requests to omdbapi.com /?. So we'll do that, /?, and then we're going to do a search. So to search, we need parameter S, it's required, and it should equal the movie title to search for. So S equals, and let's do star. So we'll get Star Wars, maybe Star Trek, hit enter, and that's it. And we get JSON, 10 results, Star Wars Episode 4, Star Wars Episode 5, 6, blah, 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 Star Trek Into Darkness. So we get 10 results there. So that is a search. But what we can also do is then take one of these, let's say the ID right here, going to copy it. And if we go back to the documentation, you can also retrieve information by ID. So as you can see here, we either need to use I or T. So I will search by an IMDb ID, T will search by an exact title. And it gives us one result. So I'll get more information. So let's do it by I. So I'm going to open up another tab, omdbapi.com, I equals that IMDb ID. You can see I get more information. So not just the title and the year, but the rating, the runtime, the genre, director, all sorts of stuff versus this search here. So we're going to work with the search. We're going to have we're going to have a form. A user can enter a query like Star Wars or Harry Potter or whatever, California. And then we're going to take whatever the user types into that form and just put it right here in the URL. So S will equal California, then we'll get this JSON back, and then we'll parse it, and then we'll display the results. So the last thing I want to mention is some of these optional parameters, some of these other things that we can work with. So here, if we take a look at the by ID search or the by ID query, we can also add in things like we want plot to be short or full, or we want Rotten Tomatoes data. So let's try that. Let's do this here. Take a look at the plot here. Now, if I add in with an ampersand, that's how query strings are constructed, and plot equals full, it's a little bit longer. I don't know if that's really that noticeable, but it goes down to here, versus if it's short, it ends right here on Darth Vader. Likewise, I can also add in tomatoes equals true, which will give me Rotten Tomatoes data. So we get all this Rotten Tomatoes data here as well. So that's kind of fun. The key thing is that you can add in these parameters. This one is mandatory, and then other things, but they all follow that key value pair like a normal query string that you've seen before. But the way that you know how to structure these calls is based off the documentation. And I should have mentioned this earlier. They have a nice example here, so you can do a search. Like if you wanted to figure out, okay, let's search for by title, a movie that has Harry Potter in the title that came out in 2013. I don't know if actually there was one. We can leave the year off and do full, and I want JSON. It gives you the URL that you could use, and it gives us a sample result. So you can play around with this. And we could change it to XML, and we get this XML, hideous XML. I don't like XML at all. So that's kind of nice to play around with it. Okay, so let's end this video here, and then in the next one, we'll actually get back to constructing the application.